Good description tries to include as many verbs as possible. Verbs are much more important than adjectives and adverbs. Let's check them out. I clattered through the door, skidded through the hall and slid into the kitchen. You can feel the action brimming in that sentence. Here, my curry sizzled in the wok and I dolloped it on a plate. I gulped it down before crashing in front of the television to wallow in my favourite TV show. Hopefully you can see how that's built up a really vivid picture, and it's done through the verbs. That's why verbs are so important. Notice how these verbs recreate sounds. Good writers don't slow their writing down by telling us what sounds could be heard. Much of this work is instead done through the choice of verb, and you can see that clattered, skidded, sizzled, gulped and crashing all suggest a variety of sounds to go with the actions. This builds layers into your descriptions. It makes a soundscape. It creates a kind of 3D description without interrupting it to tell the reader in a clunky way what the sounds were. The second massive advantage of these verbs is that they tell us a lot about the character. We can work out what sort of person they are because they clatter through the door. They're obviously in a hurry, but insensitive to other people. They skidded in, and therefore they're probably not very organised or thinking about the consequences of their actions. They're incredibly hungry because they dollop the food on the plate, which means also not just that it was a huge amount, but they want to eat it quickly. And that's backed up by the idea of gulped. Again, we get a sense of how inconsiderate they are of other people with the verb crashing, and then we are invited by the writer to criticise them because instead of sitting in front of the television, they wallow in front of the television. It creates a picture of a character who's enjoying their greed far too much. And that was all done through a short bit of writing concentrating on the verbs. Now we have 2 paragraphs for you to practice with. Once you've spotted the verbs, decides which ones you'd keep and which ones you'd change to make it more powerful. The answers coming up right now. Okay, here are the verbs. Let's see what we might have changed them to. The surfer moved. That is a very neutral verb. We could have had glided or floated, which would create a much different feeling. She looked behind her. Again, that doesn't convey any emotion, whereas if we had glanced, we might get excitement or nervousness. Trying to time the next big wave, I don't think we could improve on because it tells us exactly what she's trying to do. There isn't a better way of saying that. Now she paddled hard, pushing with her palms. Well, obviously I'm going to keep those 2 verbs because they are precise, but also they have the alliteration of P, which creates that sense of urgency and rhythm. Notice it's also in a pattern of 3. Now, listing your verbs in this way is really powerful. Now, she's ready to surf the wave. Well, we kind of already know that because she is a surfer, so we could change that word to dominate or catch or survive, verbs which have a better emotion to them. Just in time, she straightened her arms. Now that again is a precise verb, so we're going to keep it. We might have something like stiffened, which would give the same idea and also add a sense of tension because something that's stiff might break. Here we're not suggesting that her arms would break, but that she would fail in her attempt to ride the wave. Sat up again is very neutral, it's precise, but we might have sprang up if we wanted a sense of urgency, or eased up if we wanted patience and calm. Again, if we wanted some emotion, instead of got to her feet, which is neutral, we might have sprang to her feet or stumbled to her feet. 2 contrasting ways of describing the character. Did you spot the state? The board was steady. There's the verb to be. Prepared for the coming rush does give us an emotional state, but we might have changed it to something like prayed for the coming rush or dreaded the coming rush. As the wave got bigger is very neutral. We want to give it some emotion, so we could have doubled or accelerated, verbs that would give us a sense of danger. She rode on its crest works well, but if we had the word balanced, we'd have an idea that she could fall at any time, whereas rode gives us the idea that she's safe and in control. To stay on the surface is, again, a neutral term, but if we'd had something like perched, then we might see that she could come off at any time again, whether voluntarily, like a bird that perches, or involuntarily because she doesn't have the balance. She bent her knees exactly describes the action, but again it's neutral, whereas if we said she steadied her knees, we'd get the sense that she's fighting for control, and a better way of doing that would be to say she braced her knees. That would imply she had to use a lot of force and was really scared of losing control of the board. To cope is emotional here. We know that there's an opportunity for the board to get away from her, but this implies her success. Whereas if we used a verb like to struggle with the force of the wave, we'd get the idea of possible failure as well. So you are now in a position to write fantastically good descriptions by controlling your choice of verbs. All of the examples in this video have come from my ultimate guide to descriptive writing. Links in the didgeridoo underneath. And if you want to take your control of verbs to the next level, then you're going to want to click on the next video about creating more powerful verbs. See you there.